Did you grow up in an immigrant household and were told that you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, in business, or a failure? Hi, I'm Jessica Huang, your career transition coach, and welcome to Permission to Flow. And in this episode, we are going to talk all about the immigrant mentality and how it presents certain specific challenges that prevent us from pursuing our passion or purpose. And instead, we're kind of stuck in this prescribed list of good careers. Really quick to tell you a little bit of my own background. So I'm a second generation Taiwanese American. My parents grew up and met in Taiwan before immigrating here in their 20s. And I will tell you that their story is definitely that typical immigrant struggle story. My parents came here with about $1,000 in their pocket, and they landed here in New York City, not that far from where I live actually. But let's be clear, their apartment is not like my apartment. They were living in a roach-infested New York City apartment, and from the stories my dad would tell me, he would wake up in the night, turn on the light, and he would see all the roaches like scurrying into the corners. And my dad had to work in a convenience store because he couldn't get a job, even though he was like highly educated. And so he ended up going back to school actually and getting his master's degree in order to work in chemistry. And my mom worked as a secretary, which is considered a really good job given the circumstances. And my mom really climbed her way through her career working at the Port Authority. And, and I see my parents as people who did really kind of live out the American dream. You know, they both worked really long careers in their professions and really climbed up that ladder, if you will. And so that is the backdrop of what I'm going to talk about today. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this immigrant mentality, you know, this idea where it's like coming to a different country, it causes us to have a lot of these thoughts around really needing to prioritize financial security, job stability, and really building a foundation. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it is so focused on developing that base level of the hierarchy of needs, of really making sure we can put food on the table, have a roof over our heads, right? Like those really basic human needs become the priority and the focal point of how we decide what career we choose, how we make our decisions, comes from this standpoint of needing to establish ourselves, establish a foundation in the country in which we've immigrated to. And so I will say for myself, and perhaps you relate as a child of immigrants, is this idea that of really carrying over a lot of this immigrant mentality in the decisions that we're making. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of break free of those challenges. And so we're going to talk about three main ideas. The first one is talking about responsibility. And the second one is really focused on sacrifice. And the third, we're going to talk about that big bad word of failure. Okay, so let's dive into today's show. So the first thing I want to talk about is responsibility. And when I think about responsibility, this often really weighs heavily on first and second gen because of this idea that like we need to make sure that we're taking care of everyone, right? And especially, you know, so many people I know are sending money back to their family or taking care of parents or taking care of siblings or whatever the case may be. There's this level of responsibility of needing to make sure that you are that you're making good decisions in order to make sure that you can take care of others. And you know, I see this come up so much in so many of my clients, and how it keeps us from even thinking that we can toe dip outside of the lines, because there's a certain level of risk averse nature in the immigrant mentality, right? There's this idea that like we need to make safe decisions in order to not only keep ourselves safe, but keep all of those people around us safe, right? And so this level of responsibility can be like a very heavy weight, quite frankly, that can keep you in that idea of I can only do this prescribed list. And to take a step back, it's like, why is that the prescribed list, right? This doctor, lawyer, you could throw in business, engineer, pharmacist, right? Like this prescribed list of like good careers that have been designated as the thing that our immigrant parents have like pushed us towards, or whatever the case may be. And so it's like, it becomes that way because these are jobs that we consider to be safe, right? Like they're jobs where it's like, oh, well, if you do this job, you're going to get this kind of salary. And also there's this expectation like it'll be safe, right? And I want to remind you also that especially for the children of immigrants, where it's like our parents' generation lived in a very different time than what we are living in today. Job security was a completely different animal than what we're experiencing in today's climate, right? It was very normal for people like my parents both worked in their companies for 25, 30 plus years, right? And that was normal. And people had pensions, and people had these things that kind of were, there was a certain level of like, I don't know, guarantee of like, if you got into the right company, if you got into the right space, like you could do this for the rest of your life and have that security, that stability that we're looking for. And it's interesting, at least in the corporate lens, where I feel like that is a little bit of a fallacy these days, but that is kind of the pretense of why that list became the list, right? Of why it became like, oh, this is where our children, the type of careers that they should pursue because they're safe. And so it's interesting, like that prescribed list. And so again, going back to this idea of responsibility, right? Like that's why we've been pushed in this direction, and we believe that it is our responsibility to make sure that we are doing the right thing of taking the safer choice in order to make sure that we can take care of the people around us. And so how do we really break free of this idea? And to me, the main thing to think about is that I think we can get trapped in a kind of all or nothing mentality where we believe that in order that it's like one or the other, right? It's like either you 100% are in your stable job or you are 100% pursuing your purpose or passion. And I think that a really good thing to remember is like, it doesn't have to look this way. And yes, some people do end up going in that direction, myself included. But I have seen through my clients, through people around me, so many incredible examples of people who are able to move into their purpose or passion and still hold on to making sure that they are able to provide for the people in their lives. It's interesting because I think if there's certain kinds of creatives where it's become almost normalized that you hold space for both, right? Like I think of actors, I'm in New York City, there's so many actors, and I remember I go to my chiropractor and a lot of the people that were working there were actually on Broadway, which was so interesting, right? But it was because the chiropractor's office actually had the certain kind of environment that allowed them to go on their auditions and have a little bit of the flexibility so that they could still pursue Broadway shows or acting gigs or whatever, and be able to have the stability of this kind of job. There's plenty of people working in cafes or whatever the case may be. But I want you to imagine it's like, how can you then cater that to you? So it doesn't have to be working in a doctor's office. Like you can do it in a 9-to-5 corporate job. You can do it in so many different places. And it's really about finding the right fit of a job that is able to support you as you build up your purpose or your passion, whatever the case may be, and have that stability that you need to have. And, I think back to when I worked for Coca-Cola, for instance, which is a huge, big corporation. And that job, like larger corporations, I think it does actually allow you to be like, oh, this is strictly more like a 9 to 5 job, versus some like startups and smaller spaces where it's like your hours can end up being a little more fluid, is one way to put it. But there are plenty of jobs that actually can give you the space that you are able to pursue what you really want to do and maintain that stability. And so it's like, I like to think of it as like, if you're sitting out there right now and you're like, oh, actually my job is typically like a 9 to 5 and I have all this outside time outside of that and the space for it, that I can pursue something else, like that is a gold mine. And it's funny because I did not see it when I was in those circumstances at the time, and now I'm like, oh, like that would have been a great time to pursue something else outside of my 9 to 5. I just want to normalize this idea where it's like we can hold space for both, and it can look in so many different ways. Maybe it's a part-time job. Like there doesn't need to be this kind of all or nothing mentality of, if I'm in my regular stable career, like I'm not allowed to go after the thing that I really want to do. It's actually allowing ourselves to hold space for both. The last thing I want to say is that at the end of the day, I want you to realize that you are going to take care of your family. And that is not going to go away just because you've decided to pursue your passion or purpose. I think that there can be a little bit of this doubt of saying like, oh, if I move in this direction, like I'm gonna like fall off with these other things. And it's like, I want you to put back the confidence in yourself that like you at the end of the day are going to make sure that it's gonna be okay, right? Like, and making decisions from that standpoint, and that is okay. Like you're allowed to go like the only, like I get to do both, right? Like I get to move in the direction of what holds true meaning and purpose to me. And of course, I'm going to make sure that I am taking care of myself, I'm taking care of my family, and whatever the case may be. So holding space for all of that is really important. And you're not gonna suddenly go like, oh, I'm not gonna take care of everyone. Like, of course you're going to take care of everyone. Like that is allowed to still be a part of you while you are pursuing the thing that is really meant for you. Okay, so now that we've talked about responsibility, let's move on and talk about sacrifice. And this one, definitely, I remember feeling this one a lot when I was switching careers. And, because I think that there is a lot of this idea where your parents have sacrificed so much, right? I think back to when I was growing up, and my parents were gone from basically 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning until like 7, 8 o'clock at night, because they had long commutes and they worked so hard and to really take care of me and my brother. Like they were definitely, there was just so much sacrifice. And I remember seeing that in them. And so for me, it was, I kind of took on this level of responsibility, right? This level of responsibility that I needed to honor their sacrifice. And in my mind, in order to honor their sacrifice, it was following that prescribed list. And I think many of us fall into this, it's like we are the good immigrant kid, right? It's like you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing of living up to the level of sacrifice that your parents made. And so the way that we've conditioned ourselves to live up to that sacrifice is to abide by those rules, abide by that little box of what is the right career. And so I think it's interesting because in essence, we are honoring their sacrifice with another sacrifice. And I think that this is something to really realize, right? Like you're sacrificing your happiness, your well-being in order to honor another sacrifice. And to me, that is not what this is all about, right? Like I think part of what helped me really leave behind my job in finance was really going, this isn't actually honoring my parents' sacrifice. And, I think it was very fortunate that I have a very close relationship with my mother, and maybe she's listening to this, but she really was sitting there going like, what was really listening to me on, tell her about how miserable I was, and especially as I was going through burnout, especially in those really, really hard times, it was like she was watching me go, oh, but I gotta be resilient, I gotta be good, I gotta do the right thing, like stay the path. And I was trying so hard to honor her sacrifice and go, I'm going to be the good kid. I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. Like, I'm doing the right thing to honor you. And my mother was just like, but I also want you to be happy, And I think hearing that and talking to her about it so many times since then, it's like reminding yourself, like, your parents also want you to be happy. Your parents, they sacrificed to give you a better life, not for you to be miserable and unhappy. Like, that is not actually honoring their sacrifice. I will tell you, like, right now, it's like I feel like I am honoring my parents' sacrifice and able to really live out that kind of prescribed American dream in such a better, more profound way, because I am building a life that makes me happy. And I'm building a life that gives me peace. And I am building, and I mean, especially to me, like, I'm building a life where, like, I really want to help other people. Like, I really want to pay it forward. And so being in my purpose and being able to pursue the thing that really feels right to me, that feels like my calling in life, I truly fundamentally believe that that is me actually honoring their sacrifice. And that is me actually living out the real American dream for them. And it's interesting because I think that we have created this box around what is the American dream. And, if you are listening to this somewhere outside of America, I think the same idea kind of is pervasive, right? This idea of like you move somewhere else in the pursuit of a better life, right? In many regards. And so to me, it's like my parents moved here for a better life for me and my brother. And the real way to honor that is really to create a better life, right? Not to just be miserable, not to be burned out, not to be really struggling every single day. Like, that is not the dream. And the fact that we have kind of twisted the American dream in terms of like really all we're permitted is to have like a good stable job and money coming in regularly, and that is the dream, but I'm absolutely miserable. Like, that is not it. It's unfortunate because we were fed that pursuing these things was going to make us happy. And that just has not been the case for many people, myself included. And so if this is resonating with you, then I hope you are also seeing the fact that like the real American dream is really being able to pursue your purpose or your passion. So I think it's really important to really question, like, what does it mean to honor that sacrifice? And it's about so much more than just doing what you're told and pursuing the right career and being on that prescribed list. And so it's living outside of that box is actually allowing you to really honor their sacrifice. Okay, so now that we have talked about responsibility and sacrifice, let's talk about the big bad word of failure. This one, I'm going to talk about it in two regards. So the first one that I want to talk about is how failure wasn't really an option. And I think this is so ingrained in the immigrant mentality, right? Is this idea that like failure is not an option. Like, we need to be successful. We need to establish that foundation. I mentioned this whole idea of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, we've been so fixated on that bottom tier of just like the base human needs, having a roof over our heads, having food on the table, like those things we've decided are like the only thing that we've been focused on. And it's like that ability to go beyond that is what really is pursuing the dream, right? Is being able to move up the ladder and not be so fixated on this bottom tier. And, and as I said, it's like we're going to make sure that we are keeping food on the table, that we are keeping a roof over our heads. And it's like, but what if we give ourselves permission to move beyond that? And along those lines, like one thing that I was thinking about is how I've heard this so many times in like different personal development spaces of this idea of being able to like fail fast and excel faster, right? And so it's like having having a different relationship with failure. And so it's allowing ourselves to fail, quote unquote, and like learn from that failure and move forward and keep going. And I think about when I heard about this idea, I was like, I do not understand. Like, this does not compute for me. And because for me, it was like, no, we're not allowed to fail. Like, we have to go with the safe choice. Like, we can't move outside of that. And so I think it's really powerful of this idea of saying like, oh, actually, I want to be able to experiment and play around and fail. Like, really, none of these are real failures, right? Like, to me, like, nothing is a failure if I've learned from it. Like, that is my perspective on failure. And so, in essence, like, I don't think that anything actually is really, truly a failure, because it's like every single experience that we go through, we learn from them, and we do better next time, right? And so, it's interesting because this is something that I've had to adapt over time, because before I was like, oh no, we don't want to fail. Like, that's not allowed. And so I think it's really powerful for us to redefine what is failure and redefine what is success, right? And so from the failure standpoint, it's being able to say like, nothing is a failure. Like, I'm allowed to try things on and test things out and learn from it and grow and keep adapting and moving forward. And then on the other side of that is like, what is success? And I was having such a great conversation with my best friend recently, and through our conversation, I was like, you know what it is that success is really being able to have options. Success is really being able to experiment. Like, that in and of itself is success, because we've defined success as like, oh, getting that next promotion, of moving up that ladder. Like, that is what success has meant. But actually the reality is success is being able to explore and move beyond this prescribed list. That in essence is already a success. That is my definition at the very least. And so to me, it's like being able to say that the American dream is actually being able to move beyond that base level of like this prescribed list of jobs and this lowest tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and being able to pursue beyond that. That is what true success is. The other side of failure that I want to talk about is this idea that like we've in essence said, okay, if I'm not doing the doctor, lawyer, business thing, the only other option is failure. Like, even pursuing anything outside of that is seen as like not good enough, as failure, right? And I think so much of like how, at least in my culture, I don't know about yours, but I think about how it's like, oh, my parents have really enjoyed being able to go to my aunts and uncles and go like, oh, well, Jessica's in finance and, making this money and getting this promotion or whatever the case may be, right? Like, it was like, it made my parents proud of me. And that was something that was really important to me, is making them proud, making our parents proud in this one particular way. And as far as it comes to parents, I think it's really important to remember that your parents might not see it. They might not understand. But at the end of the day, you are actually fulfilling that dream for them. You are a success, even if they can't see it. Like, that doesn't change the reality of it. And as I mentioned, like, we are redefining what that American dream is. We are redefining what success is as the ability to pursue our purpose or passion. Like, that is the dream. So yeah, I just want to remind you that there's so much beyond what we have considered a failure. And actually what we thought was a failure is actually a success. And so I think it's really important for us to really look at how we've been defining failure and success and be able to define it on our own terms. I like to remember that there is no real right path. There is just the right path for you. And so I want you to remind yourself that you can give yourself permission to move beyond that limited framework that was given to you. And that is actually creating more success than what your original definition was giving you. Okay, so in today's episode, we have covered off on responsibility, sacrifice, and failure. So with responsibility, it's all about, instead of thinking like, oh, I have to limit myself in order to be responsible, it is instead moving beyond that all or nothing mentality and allowing ourselves to pursue our passion or purpose alongside of being responsible and taking care of ourselves and our family. With sacrifice, it's all about asking yourself the question of, what does it really mean to honor your parents' sacrifice? Is it all about being the good kid and having the good job while being miserable? Or is it actually about allowing yourself the freedom of options and choice and being able to build a life that you actually love? Which way do you want to honor their sacrifice? And lastly, in terms of failure, what if nothing is truly a failure? What if they're all just lessons? And what if it is not a failure to move beyond that short prescribed list, and instead a real true success is giving yourself the freedom of having options? So I hope this was helpful. Part of the reason why this has become so important to me and why I'm even talking about this today is, I think about the little girl that I was when I was growing up, and how it was like I didn't really see myself in spaces outside of that prescribed list. The media certainly didn't reflect people that looked like me, and I grew up kind of feeling out of place and that I didn't belong. And I see that there are so many strides being made today in terms of representation and so much in different spaces, but so much of why I do the work that I do is I want to see a world where it's like there are more people who look like me and more immigrants who are able to be in all different kinds of spaces. And to me, when I think of why do I say creative careers, it's really anything outside of that traditional box. It is the artists and actors and models or whatever the case may be. It's also entrepreneurs, the wellness spaces, yoga instructors, like all of these different things have felt kind of out of bounds, right? Like it felt like these are not the good careers, right? These are failures if we move outside of that box. And I want to live in a world where it's like I see people pursuing all kinds of things and not letting that immigrant mindset hold us back and keep us stuck in jobs that we are just miserable in. So I hope this resonates with you too. And, it is so beautiful seeing the world opening up and more people being able to move into these different spaces. And I hope that this can be a little bit of the current for that change. So I hope this resonated with you. And this is a little bit of a two-part series. So the next episode is going to be talking all about immigrant strengths on the other side and how we can utilize the strengths of being immigrants and first and second gen in order to move in the direction of the path that we want to be living in. And, so to me, that's what it's all about. And yeah, if this is resonating with you, if you're listening to this and going, yes, I don't want these things holding me back anymore. I do want to figure out how to redefine success for myself and be able to move in the direction of my purpose or passion, then I invite you to join me for 3 months of private coaching, and I will help guide you in your particular circumstances. So, that's the beauty of private coaching, is really that ability to look at your particular circumstances and where you really want to move yourself in, and be able to guide you through these challenges and being able to navigate all of this specific to your experience. So if that is of interest to you, you can go to my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com, and book a free sales call with me to get started. And so I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one. Want to create more flow in your life? Go to the description below and sign up for the email list. I'll be sharing more insights and strategies with you, just like the ones you heard today. Remember, the power to create the life you desire resides within you, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. The world needs what you will create.